Welcome back to another episode of Venture Chronicles. I am very excited. We are a little over a week until the Social Impact World Summit. I've been waiting for this all year long and planning for it, and it's finally here. And now I'm in the midst of essentially scheduling speaker calls. I have a number of speaker calls on my calendar this week. And these speaker calls are, just go over logistics and answer any questions that speakers might have, and also walk through the platform that we're going to be using day of, so that way they're actually familiar with it. And so the last thing you want to happen is, you have a speaker join and they have no idea where the buttons are, and how to even join. And then you have a lot of issues that arise from that. And then it's a domino effect. One speaker has an issue, then a bunch of other things start happening. And so these speaker calls are mainly put in place to kind of mitigate that and ensure a much smoother flow of the actual summit. One thing I did differently this year than last year. So obviously this year, more speakers. Last year we had 13 speakers. This year we have 24, potentially a couple more coming. And so it's a challenge trying to schedule speaker calls for that many individuals. And so one thing I did this year was use Calendly to allow speakers to vote on the specific time slots this week that work with their schedules to essentially help create a much smoother process for scheduling these speaker calls. One thing I want to do differently next year is to probably do the speaker call maybe even sooner, maybe 2 weeks before the actual summit. That way we can get all the speakers on ideally one call. Because what I'm finding is, it's less, it's not really efficient when you're having to do all these different speaker calls for only a handful of speakers here and there versus the whole entire lineup of speakers. So something I'm going to do next year is try to figure out a way to improve that process to make it much more efficient. And so that's what this week is all about, is essentially preparation, preparing the speakers, preparing myself. I do plan on doing a test run of the event, so that way I refresh myself on how to run a summit, because it's been obviously over a year since the last summit. And so it's much different than just doing a hour-long webinar, for example. There's a lot more moving parts. And when you're doing it solo, you got to make sure that you are prepared for the best and the worst case scenarios. You want to make sure that where all the buttons are. You want to make sure that you have basically a run of show, right? The schedule, print out the schedule, put it next to your computer or your monitor to ensure that you know what's coming up next. And, as a organizer of a summit, one thing that I recommend is ensuring a very tight schedule. So for this year's summit, just like last year, we have a 5-minute buffer between every session. So what that means is there's a cutoff time. So let's say a speaker's session is from 11 to 11:45. Then the next session is at 11:50. There's a 5-minute buffer time, right? What that means is at 11:45, that first speaker, they're done. They have to be done. No matter where they're at in their presentation, they're cut off, because essentially what happens is if they run over, it's a domino effect. Now the other speaker has less time to speak, then they're going to run over, and then so on and so forth. And it starts this chain reaction that really messes up the agenda and how things are actually supposed to flow. And so making it very clear that these are strict time slots is very, very important. And that's something that I learned last year and that I carried it over to this year. And so that's the quick update. The summit is next week, all preparation this week. I am scheduling speaker calls. I am preparing myself. I am doing essentially a mock event just so I understand the flow of the event and I know where all the potential pitfalls might lie that I can try to mitigate somehow, some way before the actual event. And then just obviously thinking about the attendee experience and giving them as much value as possible. And then, of course, continuing to drive registrants. The good thing about this year is we have surpassed the total number of registrants that we were able to generate last year. And then when you add in the 24, potentially 25, 26 speakers, if we get some more speakers who join some additional sessions that are already finalized, then we have a really, really, really good turnout. And I'm very excited about how things are looking from a reg perspective. So we'll see how things go, and we will go from there.